Excuse me, can anybody hear me online? I can't get any audio for the folks that are in the room.
I can hear you. I can't hear the folks at the district office in the meeting.
I'm not sure if the line is muted. Now we can hear you, although there's an echo, but
Is it possibly? No,
that's still there.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us without feedback? I think that's the important. Without feedback? No, I don't know
Jamie,
if
is
we
the
could hear
owl
them.
lit up red or blue?
It was
It's
red.
not lit up at all.
Thumbs,
Kevin, can you hear us?
thumbs up if you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you, Kristen.
Perfect. Can you hear us now?
Yeah.
No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay, perfect.
Kevin, we are at the edge of our seats.
Would you want me to reshare that resolution or can we move on?
We're discussing the resolution. We introduced it and discussed it a little, but Kevin, did you have something to add to that?
Can you make copies of the resolution?
No, I can't. I'm sorry.
You don't have oh, that's right, we don't have a copier.
So Kevin, I was just saying that I just, did my best to suggest why we felt this resolution was timely and important. And I said that you had something you would want to add. I think you do.
Yes.
So
Yes, thank you. Yep. So as you know, last month we had a DEI resolution which passed unanimously through the exec committee and the board at our last board meeting, actually, and we only had one abstention. And basically, that resolution was about inclusion, workplace equity, and this was directed towards the New York City Comptroller as well as the Chief Investment Officer of the New York City Pension Fund, which is the third largest municipal pension fund in the country. And in the past, they've been leaders on issues that our community cares most deeply about. And that resolution centered on encouraging New York City Comptroller as well as the Chief Investment Officer at the New York City Pension Fund to engage those leaders in their ecosystems that have announced either the abandonment or scaling back of DEI initiatives. And so, again, we can be a leader and a strong voice on this issue. And I think the Trump administration is overreaching into state and local governments, and they're trying to dumb down our educational system as well as whitewash our history. And this is an opportunity for us to take a stand. And I know the chair of the New York City Department of Education, as well as our elected leaders and other leaders in the city, have already voiced opposition to Trump's forcing them to sign onto this onto their administration's agreement, and so we're supporting that.
yeah, and the only thing I would add is that the council and deputy commissioner did, when I spoke to him today, said that the board of regents and obviously the commissioner supports this because he would have sent a letter without Commissioner Rosa's support. But they met with the board of regents as well and the Board of Regents voted in support of this position as well, so.
Good. I want to thank you and Kevin for putting this together. I do think it's a good resolution and I'm happy we're doing it. I think as a community board, we get in the habit of writing letters or resolutions to tell someone they've done something wrong or to have an ask. We're always like, what's the ask? But it's also really valuable to tell people when you think they're doing a good job, right? Like, they're government agencies or they're elected officials, so they need to see that their constituents are behind them. So I think it's really valuable right now to stand up and say, thank you, we support you, this is the right thing. I also think we're in an era where we know we're having really serious challenges to civil rights, right? And you can ask agencies or electeds to go out there and stick their neck out for everyone, but they need the support behind them, right? To say, this is worth doing, we want you to do it, we've got your back. So I think this is really timely, it worked out really well, and I'm glad you put it together for us.
What we're saying, although I know it's all obvious to you, is feds do not butt in to New York State education law and policy. We elected or our electeds put these people into office and we want them there and we want them making decisions for our state. Other states can do what they want, but we will do what we want.
That's right. I think, the curriculum in Jackson, Mississippi might be quite different from all these districts have received the request to sign a certification and each will decide what it will do. But I guess if we would want to tell Jackson, Mississippi what their curriculum or hiring practices, et cetera, should be. And I do think it's a state and local issue.
I just want to make one remark, which is we do know that there will or could be retaliation. We don't sign, they may not give us any money.
Yes.
But we're doing that knowingly.
And you know what? And that's fine, because when you remember when we were kids and you deal with a bully, you don't back away from a bully, you get up and you fight. And by agreeing to and allowing a bully to bully us, that just makes them a bully. So yeah, I'm willing to fight.
And go ahead, Michael's waiting.
Yeah, so, I think I won't speak for anyone else, but for myself, this feels like something I can support. I do just kind of want to raise just some thoughts that I'm having of hearing some of the things that other folks are saying. On the one hand, we're saying we don't want the federal government to butt into state and city issues, but we're saying that we do want federal money, or so like that feels like a little bit like a disconnect. I'd also probably say that, again, I can't speak for other people, but I imagine there are probably a lot of people who in recent history felt that the removal of certain federal rights or the perception of federal rights and trying to move things like the issues of abortion into the state level was met with the opposite belief in energy. And so I think like where, I know these are separate issues, require separate thought streams, but I think it's just food for thought. I'd say my last point on this also is that, it's obviously a very politically charged environment at the moment. There was a mention and someone was saying that, and Kevin, I think the suggestion is that we start sort of embracing some of these more like overtly political beliefs. I'm not saying that that's inherently wrong or anything like that, but I also think it's critical to remember that this community, just like almost every other district around the country, saw a shift to a more conservative political perspective based on the votes from the last election. So while the folks around this table may feel a certain way, the results of the election suggest a shifting in environments. And so, if we're trying to think about what the community wants, what the neighborhood wants, I think that's all. Again, and I'm not saying that's a personal perspective, that's just a thought.
So I'm a lawyer, and I think very much, as I think we're now starting to learn each other, I lean very hard on the law when things get tough. So whatever I might think emotionally, or as a Black woman, or as a kid who grew up went to public schools, any of that, I put it aside. And I think what makes this letter work for me is not the pushback on DEI or what I think of Donald Trump. What it is about is what our country's always been about, and that is separation of federal and state. That's the open tension. I mean, for better or worse. Sometimes it's for worse. But in this case, if the federal government comes back to the states and says, well, actually, let's go to court. We're going to show you that the Harvard case actually does apply to K through 12, and we're going to prove it in court. Then it's a different ballgame. It's a different ballgame. Or we're going to have an administrative hearing over whether or not our rules apply to your decisions. But to just sort of forthwith require the certification is what I think our resolution and their letter is about. So I hear everything you're saying, and I totally agree. We don't just represent this group at this table, we represent our whole community. But I think most people in the community would be comfortable with the rule of law applying to schools. I think
Next.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off Michael said, this like talking point or what we're saying of like staying out of like states and state issues actually feels like a very conservative talking point, and it has been for a while now. And I personally, not speaking for other people, I'm actually in support of the federal government having more say, more involvement. I want for whatever reason. And I think what you're saying, that it has to be illegal for the federal government to direct public schools to do a certain thing, whether I agree with it or not, that I don't agree with. I think the federal government can make policies and can use the resources at their disposal to enact those policies. And while I may disagree with those policies, I agree in principle that in order that we actually have changes in this country and things move on and we don't have fractured rules with different states, I'm actually in support of this use of the federal government, even if I'm not in support of what it is they're doing it for.
Right.
So for that reason, I'm going to have to, I think, vote against.
Right. So let me just try and clarify what I'm saying. First of all, they're dismantling the Department of Education, something I support. Jimmy Carter founded it and I support it. They're dismantling it. But putting that aside, I'm actually agreeing with you that the federal government should be permitted to engage with the states around issues of education. I would even say abortion, but not in a, I was going to say sua sponte, that's the wrong word, not in a sort of frenetic and without any due process. That's the word we always use, right? Without any due process. You can't just say, we're going to take your money, sign this in 10 days, or we're going to take your money, or your $2 billion away from you. That's the problem I have, is a process problem, not the, I actually agree with you. I agree with you. I would like to see a conversation between the federal government and the states about, fine, DEI, fine, let's have the discussion. But there is no conversation. It's the letter is actually appended to the resolution if you want to look at it, the Trump administration sent. And it says, sign this in 10 days or you will lose your funding. And I just don't think that is that's just not fair. Even if I were in a jurisdiction that maybe agreed with the Trump administration on its DEI policies, I just wouldn't want a 10-day turnaround on anything. I want some time to have a conversation about it. So
Well,
that's
it's been more
really
than 10 days since the letter was sent.
yeah. Well, so far they haven't acted on it.
Right.
Okay, Iris,
I want to talk about another issue, which is it's related. It's a college and university issue where the administration wants to now get them involved in accreditation. That's a private issue, private colleges. So this idea of what they're trying to do here is now being extended through the entire educational process. If you read what they've been putting forth on that, is they want the ability to hire faculty, select students, so forth and so forth. So this is a further extension of their involvement outside of what they fund largely.
Excuse me, I don't
And
understand
eventually
what
they'll
you're
bring it
saying.
back in the other direction to public education. They'll say, look at what we did to private colleges. You need to comply with this.
Excuse me for 1 second. I don't understand what they're saying. Are they, the federal government, wait a second, let me get the words out, please. Is the federal administration is saying to college X that the federal administration will be selecting students and
They-
faculty?
They want to be
Yeah.
an integral part of the accreditation process.
Accrediting the institution. For the
Okay.
institution to get its accreditation, they want the federal government to be a part of that process.
How do they even have the staff to get involved in thousands and thousands of educational?
They will hire them from Tesla.
Nobody's
buying cars right now.
They'll solve everything.
But, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I read this afternoon, I read and now the response. And I read the government's letter. And the government's letter is very sly in that it doesn't say get rid of DEI. It says get rid of all illegal DEI practice. And I think what we ought to do, and the state's letter does it to a large extent, is to point out that the government has not advised us as to what practices they think are illegal, and therefore we can't certify. And I would propose adding, if I can, in the second to last, I'm sorry, the last whereas clause, have it read, whereas NYSED has assured US DOA that it is already in compliance with Title VI and federal civil rights laws. And DOE has not advised NYSED what policies or practices constitute illegal, in quotes, DEI policies. And accordingly, it would be impossible for NYSED to have signed the certification.
Can you read that just again,
Yeah.
slightly slower?
Sure.
Thank you.
Whereas NYSED has assured US DOA that it is already in compliance with Title VI and federal civil rights laws. But and DOE has not advised NYSED what policies or practices constitute illegal DEI activities. And it would accordingly have been impossible for NYSED to have signed the certification. So I think that, you know, the state's letter makes that clear.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to piggyback on that.
Yeah, what do you think, Jamie? I think that's like a friendly
Yeah,
amendment, just
absolutely.
clarifying
Oh,
that
absolutely.
paragraph.
Yeah, I can give
Yeah.
you,
Yeah,
if you take paper.
I typed.
she's on it. I'm watching her type it right now.
You type the
As
whole
much
thing
as I
out.
love paper, Richard, I
Unbelievable.
typed it right in, friendly as it was. Thank you.
But, you know, at the same time, they come up with a new set of rules every day, so they elaborate on what are the rules today.
Right.
And then you'll say, we comply with this, oh no, here's our new rules.
Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, we may even want to add a paragraph that says that this is suspiciously looks like an effort by DOE to get its nose under the tent and involve itself improperly further in the educational affairs of the state, something like that.
Not to get too into the weeds into the process, but I'm curious. I think you mentioned that they're sort of threatening to withhold, was it $2 billion of funding? Is there precedent for the federal Department of Education kind of going so aggressively? Because I know the
Could
federal government,
everybody speak up a little? I'm
Oh,
having
sorry.
trouble
Sorry.
hearing.
I think, because my understanding is often the federal government does use the withholding of funds to essentially bully state governments.
Yeah.
into doing so.
Absolutely.
That's not.
Yeah.
But you have to follow a certain process, I think, especially if the funding is already appropriated in this case. So in the past, has the federal Department of Education sort of threatened to withhold funding?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Because if this is like a pretty
Mhm.
big escalation,
Right.
I think this makes, in my opinion, or at least my vote, pretty easy. But then if this is kind of a weaponization of a process that has happened in the past.
Well, it has, I don't remember how it worked out because at the time I was in high school, but certain Richard Nixon was known for impounding funds. And some of you who might be lawyers might have studied this in law school. but I didn't have it at my high school. So if somebody wants to talk about that episode and how that turned out, it has been done in the past, we tried.
You can, the federal government has a contract with the state, and if the state violates the contract, they can withhold, what Trump is doing is withholding money unrelated to his claim of there's a violation. And, and I am sure that in the contract, the state has the right to appeal any denial. So the 10-day thing is just a bluff.
Yeah, I mean, the department, I mean, I'm not an expert on the history of the Department of Education, or, I mean, I'm somewhat of an expert on the history of education as kind of the Department of Education itself. It's a relatively new thing. I mean, I think it was established in 1980.
Yeah, I think it was like 79 or 80. That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking. It doesn't have as long a track history that like,
It doesn't go back like DOJ,
Yeah.
it goes back to 1870.
right.
So the track record is short, and it was a response to the recalcitrance of the states to properly respond to the Brown versus Board of Education. But in terms of the funding, the machinations around funding, not that I know of.
It sounds
Not that
like
I know,
I was sort of
because
reading.
it's so new.
Yeah, I'm just reading the letter that the government's sending out. They're saying, oh, the contract says you have to comply with federal laws, and we're saying DEI is not compliant with federal laws.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, they don't actually say it in the letter.
yeah, they imply.
They have a adjective, illegal.
Right.
DEI.
And that's why the state's one says we believe we are complying with all federal law. Right.
Right, I mean, I think a clever lawyer, just to play devil's advocate, a clever lawyer could look at their citations and make an argument that DEI violates federal law. DEI programs violate federal law. A very clever tactician could make that argument if you got to court. But I think you owe it to the recipients of your grants and funding streams to go to court and make that argument. Make those arguments that the Harvard case applies to K through 12, and that the title, the civil rights titles, include DEI in their discrimination rubrics. And those are the things that are in court or in administrative hearings. You don't just have a 10-day window and nobody has an opportunity to defend themselves.
Michael, I think was waiting, and then Audrey.
I just want to say, to bring it back to like resolution, the actions of the committee, and potentially for board. When we last spoke, I was very, and I think you probably was earlier, like I was hesitant on what we might be able to do, what we might be able to say, because at that moment it felt like we didn't really know where. And you point this out, I think now we do. Yes, so like now there is an actionable item, whether even if it's something that's just in support of what state is doing. And I think because of that, now I feel much more confident as a committee, we are able to put together a resolution. I think that is my fear coming into it, that we really kind of know where to strike. Now there's at least an actionable item. Yeah, and I think that now we are narrowing that, so I think that's a good thing. As more issues likely come up, it will allow us to continue that same level of focus. So that's a
I do hear you loud and clear that, we have to be aware that the community is diverse and we're attacking right, and we have to think broadly and deeply about who we represent. This isn't just our own little coffee clutch. So to really tailor things narrowly to focus on what is right in the moment for our community.
Actually, just wanted to say, I thought that was a good point, because something that our office gets a lot of outreach on is, hey, what are your board members doing? They're supposed to represent us, and it seems like they're not, so
That's good. Yeah. Very
we hear that a good amount.
Yeah, Ira.
With that said, various elected officials
Oh, I'm sorry.
in the course of this week have held multiple town halls and I don't know if anybody here attended any of the town halls other than myself. I know that some people attended last night's town hall. I know other people attended Monday's town hall. I didn't attend the one in ethical culture, so acoustics are awful. My hearing is not good enough there. They have acoustics. But in the case of ethical culture, they filled the auditorium. Okay, and in the case of last night, they filled the Goddard Center's space. And the last time I've seen this fill Goddard space like that was when 108th Street was being heard. So there are people concerned about these issues, and we have had a wide range of questions raised. And I think there's nobody in this audience, at least when I went to last night, I can't imagine there was one the other night, who is advocating for the federal position here. If there is, God bless them, I don't think that they actually come out and engage civically in any fashion. If somebody doesn't engage civically, we don't know, we cannot answer them.
Except at elections where they did win.
They won on a national basis.
But not the
In
Upper
every-
West Side,
Not on the Upper West Side, but but I'm just saying like,
which is who we represent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did not win. I'm not gonna go through that. Everybody knows what the statistics are.
Right.
Okay, and so on a national basis, they won.
The
On a
president doesn't seem
statewide
to
basis,
know.
they didn't. In terms of this community, they did.
but there was also a shift. I think that's my
The
question.
shift is going from here to here. The shift
Right.
wasn't like
Like those are people, right? They are members of the community. I don't mean to like sidetrack this, but I think
okay,
it's just-
well, if you want to represent them, that's great. Run for election.
well, we're here representing.
Right, it is,
Well,
I think the national stats are not relevant to the local
We're talking about
community.
But then we shouldn't be talking about a federal issue.
Do I ever get to
Like,
see?
We're talking about New York State issue.
No, we're talking about what this community is
Yeah.
saying in response to a
Yeah,
federal
I think
issue.
this is a local and state.
So you are
public
speaking
issue.
up for
Yeah,
this
yeah.
community on a federal issue,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
our role as a community board, right?
Yeah,
That is
I
what
do
we're
think
supposed
we
to do.
sometimes get involved in issues
Yeah.
that are not for us.
Yeah.
Why are we doing this? It has nothing to do with community boards.
I'm sorry.
But here I do think because that's why I'm before this committee. Whereas we were together a few days ago and I didn't understand why we were talking about a crime issue. Committee we're talking, but here, this is where this belongs. These
I
are
agree.
public
I
schools.
don't,
and
I'm not
this is-
disagreeing.
Yeah.
But we're
And
here
I've been
all-
waiting to speak, I'm sorry.
So basically, the feds have a hammer at our heads trying to terrorize us. And we have two choices. One, we're terrorized and just say meekly, do what you want, just give us our money. Or we say, no, one side or the other will be suing. If we don't get our money, we will be suing. If they feel that, multiple districts are resisting, they won't be suing, they'll just be
Right.
holding the money. So likely, the people suing will be the people in the position of the various states who will not comply. And that's where we are. So the legal approach is definitely there.
All right, let's wrap this up so we can vote soon. Go ahead, Richard, and then
Yeah,
Ira.
This has nothing to do with promotion, but I'm wondering whether there is available as a resource, what the policy of the state or the local boards of education actually is with respect to DEI. Is there something written down? I've never seen it. I've never read it anywhere. But there must be a policy.
Yeah, well, we now have a direct line to our state, number 3 person at the New York State Department of Education. So would you like me to get that information for
I think
us?
it would be useful for all of us.
Because now I'm on this, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, I'd
We'd be
I'd
happy to have you
ask-
join us.
I'd be happy to
Yeah.
ask him.
I think it would be
He's
useful to have
delightfully
that.
responsive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay,
will
go
ask
ahead,
him.
Ira.
By the way, the ultimate downside of this is, we talked about this last month. If we're the state of Mississippi And close to a third of our money comes from the federal government. Resisting the federal government, which Mississippi is not going to do in this case, is a real issue. New York City did the same analysis. And if the state government or the city government aren't funded federally, the downside for us is not great, but it is not awful. Okay,
Right.
just like
Yeah,
Harvard said,
stakes aren't
we
as
can
high.
deal with it.
It's pretty awful. It's not Harvard. Harvard can survive.
Yeah,
Excuse me, as an
A couple of
employee,
$1 billion is a
Right.
huge chunk.
excuse me, as an employee of the New York City public school system, the staff is terrified because they know that the monies that are taken away will have a terrible impact. That doesn't mean we go along meekly, but yeah, it is terrible. It is awful.
It's not
And nobody's
nothing.
gonna wanna be a teacher.
It's not nothing.
All right, are
Just-
we?
Can I just put the numbers out there? It's
Yeah.
7.3% of the funding of New York's.
That's a
In the
huge-
last cycle, it was 7.3%.
It's not a third of this.
That's a huge.
So it's
I
significant.
understand,
It's
but
not
there
hard.
are ways of addressing it. It's not like we're Mississippi.
Are we ready to vote on this resolution? All right. Someone call the question? Thank you. All in favor of supporting this resolution? I don't know why someone couldn't count to 6. It's not that big a number. What about Kevin? Okay,
I'm a yes, I just couldn't find my hand raise button.
thank you. All opposed to the resolution? One. All non-committee members? Favor. All non-committee members opposed? And anyone abstaining for cause? All right, so the resolution passes 7 to 1 to 1 to 0.
Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, because I want to move on to part 2, and we have Naveed back. He likes to come talk to us, I don't know, every 6 months or so. It's good to have a direct line in the neighborhood to the panel for education policy.
And this is a topic that actually is very deeply, I'm involved in this right now.
I
so-
saw
Come
you
sit at the table and join us.
reacting
You don't
over
have to-
there.
I
Yeah.
was wondering if you had public comment, I have some comments,
We
but
would
thank you.
love
That's
to
it.
Oh,
have
yeah.
The main thing around process here is that we don't know who the next president is gonna be, right? And if we let this happen and the next one comes and says like, no women are allowed in public schools,
Right.
which is protected under US Ed, only come up once and you give an inch to take a mile,
Right.
so I mean, we really have to.
Only female teachers or only male.
Only,
teachers,
yeah.
right.
That sort of thing, like no more gender integrated schools are allowed there.
Well, I mean,
That's-
what they're heading toward, particularly when you start to read what the was happening at the college level, is that somebody saw a film from the 1930s based on what colleges were prior to the First World War.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any of us at this table would be admitted to any of those colleges.
Yep. So that's, so civil rights protection by US Ed was one of the main things they do, 50% of their work, and the rest is administering the funds that Congress has already allocated. So if they don't give us our money, we should sue them based on congressional allocations not being sent to us.
By the way, I have the opposite take. I think it was easier for me to get into my college than it would be today. I would not be able to get into my college.
I don't believe you went to law school yet. But I was talking about the 1930s image.
Yeah.
Well, I had an uncle who was at Princeton
I mean-
in 1925. And the class and the percentage of Jewish students in Princeton in
Oh my gosh.
1925 was the same as it is now.
Really?
Yes.
That's
About
interesting.
17%.
Richard, when this meeting's over, let's talk about the ugly bicker. You know that story?
I remember bigger.
Let's
All
talk
right,
about the
let's
ugly
talk
bicker.
about, let's stay on topic though. Maybe the first thing, I know you probably have a few things to talk to us, so you can outline that, but you know, we've been working and we're really concerned about this empty, unused DOE space
Yep.
at 1972 Broadway, 15 classrooms, 15 empty classrooms that are, I don't know if you've gotten to do your walkthrough yet.
Not yet, yeah.
It is astoundingly beautiful space, and it is completely, every chair, every whiteboard, everything, physical object you need for a school is in there. So we need the DOE to get students in that school, like, make
so-
sure we're using this space.
Yeah, this is the location that was formerly Century 21. Like
Yeah,
on
yeah.
60 something.
Before that.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I remember. I was here.
I shopped a lot more cars.
But during the de Blasio administration, they saw a huge need. Well, it was a pro universal pre-K administration, and they saw this as an asset politically for them, and were expanding it to make it available to everyone, not just for people that they expect to apply, but actually expanding the scope of public education to help families afford to live in the city, which is a huge issue right now. The Adams administration came in with a sledgehammer to early childhood education, essentially creating leadership in that department that wasn't really interested in the universality of it, and started playing games around not being enough demand, and we should only put this in neighborhoods where there's high poverty, creating that socioeconomic segregation that has been sort of something I'm completely against. Public systems work best if everybody has a stake in them and puts their kids in them and uses them and then fights for them right together. So they succeeded in sort of administratively bungling pre-K and 3K as a rollout until about a week and a half ago. They got enough pushback, enough pushback from all of the people that are running, hearing from all of their constituents saying that we cannot afford to raise families in the city, and we need you to do something about it, talk about it during the campaign. And so woke up, somehow Bill de Blasio showed up at the same press conference. It was weird, really strange to me. But they added $172 million for early childhood education, which really easily covers staff for a space that is equipped, that is fully paid for capital-wise, and just needs teachers in the space to add seats. You know, Councilmember Berger has been on this since the beginning, and she really has identified Bank Street. I think we've spoken about it in this meeting 6 months ago as a CBO that can run this early childhood space. And I feel like the one thing that the DOE is really failing to do is being forward thinking. They're always responding like, oh, there's not enough demand, so let's reduce the number of seats to match the lack of demand of today, as opposed to saying we are starting a flagship Bank Street operated early childhood center here, and all you parents that send your kids to private nursery school for $60,000 a year, look at this, right? It's free. And consider public schools, and this is the gateway. This is the gateway to get your kids in here, and to sort of nourish programs of that sort. Which is how, if I was starting a company, I would do that. Right? Create something that I think will have high demand and respond to that, as opposed to just waiting for people to show up or not show up, and then 3 years later closing things. It's very reactive, so reactive that it's deeply frustrating as a member of the board. Who's uncompensated and asking them like to do something forward looking for once. And this is they pay for everything. The lease is being like they're paying rent on this space. So to do nothing with it and to consider, they're talking about potentially winding it down. Just literally closing.
Oh, wow.
So all of that money will go to waste. All the furniture, all of the lease and the renovations that have done to the space, and that's not really. I'm deeply against that. And I would love to see Bill's plan come to fruition. So I have some sort of inside numbers that are not public, but the neighborhood has about 90% utilization of their, by zip code, of their early childhood school seats. And I know that different schools have different demand profiles based on historical patterns, right? Some schools are seen as like really great schools for usually socioeconomic reasons. They're in wealthier zones, and everybody tries to get their kids in there. Some schools are not so lucky yet. And if we don't try something in the space that's fully paid for by just putting some teachers in there and opening the application, we're never gonna know. Our school, I'm up on 105th Street. We have 200 people on the wait list for pre-K. So like we added sections and they're all full. So I don't see how.
And there's still a wait list. Because like they haven't given us hard numbers, but the one thing DOE keeps saying is there's not enough demand, which
the way
Just
they,
given like our history in the city of New York, I find that really
yeah, the way
unlikely.
they work is they choose an answer and then they work backwards on what arguments to present to you to justify their answer.
We also, in the distant past,
Yeah.
I will remember this when West was opening,
Yeah.
we got predictive numbers, like birth rate numbers to
Yeah.
look at, like, no, those kids were not in sixth grade yet,
Yeah.
but we could still somewhat predict how
Yeah.
many kids would be in sixth grade in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
We can predict how many 3-year-olds will be in the zip code in
Yeah.
3 years' time.
Yeah, and I know at least 5 families that are like either in my kids' classes that have left the city for just
Yeah,
affordability
that's real.
reasons. They're like, oh, we can't find a school to put our children, there's no seats, and there's no reason to continue paying the rent. Like that came up during the SAT discussion, like there was a kid that missed it by just a little bit because they were in the wrong zone to get discovery admission to status.
Um,
They were actually in shelter. They would have stayed, made it work in the city had that seat been available to them, or if they had, their kid was going to. So it's in the news. I'm like, yeah, look at the story, right? Like this is the thing that you have to prevent as elected officials, as administrators. I'll send the link to Kristen, yeah, and I was sharing it. It came up during the SHSCT discussion. I'm like, look, this is a child living in a shelter that qualified for specialized high schools, but because they were attending a school that's not a Title I school, their shelter was next to a non-Title I school, that disqualified that child specifically.
Because they would qualify for the Discovery Program,
Yeah.
yeah. And
I have a statement and then a question.
Yeah.
So my understanding is that the Department of Education gets money
Yeah.
per child. So the number of students in the system now determine how much money.
Yeah.
And for whatever reasons, whether it was COVID or whatever, I think they went from 1 million students to what?
900.
Right,
Close to
yeah,
about
so they
100,000.
lost this
Yeah.
amount of money.
Yeah.
Whether the people left the city, they transferred to charter schools, I don't know. So I'm wondering if what Kristen just said about how they can predict the student population, which means predict the amount of money that will be coming in, works in such a way that you can be proactive rather than reactive. Just sit there and see how many people
Yeah.
are signing up, and then you have no seats for them.
Yeah.
How does it all how can it make sense if it doesn't already?
There's a couple of moving pieces there. The per student funding, it starts in kindergarten. So that's fair student funding formula that uses census of the classroom. K through 12 is funded that way. Pre-K and 3K were special programs that have sort of block allocations. So they will pay for an entire section and its staff, because it's actually not DOE, it's the Department of Early Childhood Education. They're administered with the DOE, but like their funding stream is completely separate. So like a school will get $250,000 for a full 15 or 18 student class in 3K or pre-K. Regardless of how many kids are there. So there's a little bit of a concern there, but that actually helps. That harkens back to like pre-fair student funding, where that class is always fully equipped. It's fully staffed. And even if they're a kid short, they don't have to worry about firing the paraprofessional that's in that room. And that really creates an environment of growth and encourages parents to not worry about losing their child's paraprofessional because the class is one person short and the salary of the paraprofessional can't be covered because the full class is funded on a classroom basis, not on a student enrollment basis. But otherwise, we get this company, we pay statistical consulting. They do demographic projections and they come to the CECs.
But I was just thinking, because it's a question from what you just said, because it's the Department of Early Childhood, it's not I'm guessing it's not the Office of District Planning.
They're involved.
Because they're usually the people who come up with that data.
Space management is there, district planning is there, but we get enrollment numbers and then I'm like, where's pre-K and 3K? They're like, oh, that's somewhere else and you'll get that in 3 months. And I need it together so I can tell how many kids are physically in the building.
Right.
They've started getting better at that. But it's still a little bit of a bureaucratic problem that these are two separate buckets of students. But just on a general, like, parent demand and constituent demand for the electeds, everything is about childcare. Right? There's a huge article in the New York
Yeah.
Times about 10 days ago on childcare,
Right.
driving families out of, and now the candidates are all saying, we're gonna do 0 through 2 also. I'm like, okay, wait, can we finish 3K?
Exactly,
Can we finish
that's
3K
my
and 3K
concern.
first?
Like,
Two is a whole other.
Yeah.
set of rules.
to tell you the truth, they are thinking in this space, they could have some very early childhood.
Yeah.
Which would be, under 3.
Yeah.
And there seems to be enough space for it. It just changes the ratios, because the ratios for
Small.
very early are really small,
Yeah.
as makes sense,
Yeah.
to keep the children safe.
And that's
right?
been completely out of education. That is a completely separate department. It's not even early childhood. So that, I don't know who does.
Yeah, and I'm slightly concerned, although I think that there is need as far as like activating and being able to use this space quickly. I feel like the more departments you pull in,
Right.
the slower this process
Yeah.
is to happen.
Yeah, so
Mm.
if they could just use some of that $170 million to check the demand of a Bank Street operated early childhood.
Right.
It's already past the application deadline, which is frustrating, so
Next year.
it would have to be next year. I mean, they could make an offer.
No, they
We
could
have made an
they could
offering.
open it.
They have opened applications
Yeah.
for when space becomes available, which is what happened in my
But
school
the-
building. They opened a section for the entire wait list, and everybody essentially came there. So,
And- Is that how they open it to the wait list? Because as the only potential problem I see with it is it could hurt operating 3K and pre-K seats if people try to leave the seat they've currently been assigned to move to this like bright and shiny new space.
No, this is, I guess, yes, but this is for the waitlist people that have no seats. already,
Right.
Yeah,
And
so they'll be just waiting for whatever, like PS84 seat and say, oh, can you wanna go here? And they'll,
right,
yeah, so PS84 is full.
yeah,
So,
and we've noted that this space is really well connected in
Yeah.
public transportation. Like it is actually an accessible space.
Yeah.
To a lot of the district,
Yeah.
to basically all of District 3, I don't see any real barriers. And to large parts of District 2 as
Yeah,
well.
and this will benefit also people that work in this neighborhood, because many parents I know actually take their kids with them to work
Mhm.
and put the child in the school that's next to their office.
Yeah, historically, when we started at PS9, it had no child left behind. And so we had people coming from upper Manhattan.
Yeah.
We had people who worked in the neighborhood, who lived in Queens.
Yeah.
And if you want to talk about diversity
Yeah.
in the school, as long as you stayed out of, there was a district GT program.
Right.
Which had its own restrictions, but if you were in the Gen Ed program,
Yeah.
the diversity was wild.
Yeah. And those kids are getting served in a way that they might not in their home neighborhood, and that's fine, right? Like, once that's full, we copy and paste that to other places.
But, the funny thing is, off a different subject. At the end of the day, when you saw where kids graduated from high school, because our oldest just graduated a couple years ago, it didn't make a difference which side of that school you were on. And a lot of the kids who were no childhood, left behind kids, did really benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did not necessarily end up in a specialized high school, but they ended up in
Yeah.
competitive admission high schools.
Yeah, and I argue it benefits the kids that are also in the GNT to have that exposure, to figure, to see what real life will look like once they get out of there, once they leave their own school, so.
Michael's like,
May I just ask, I'm sorry that I don't know this, I tried looking online, but I couldn't find it. 3K in this community, like what options are available? I think I've been pretty open about like supporting this in any capacity.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just curious like, what other options are currently available?
There are fewer, because the schools were better enrolled in the downtown part of District 3. There are fewer 3K sections in the public school spaces here. There's a lot of CBO operated ones. They're usually not that many seats.
There's these things like Bright Horizons.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And Bright Minds
and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, with the CBOs, a portion of their seats will be 3K.
Yeah.
And that portion will be just like private sector pay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they'll have, it's by section, so they'll have at
Yeah.
least 15 3K seats in there, so they can do
Oh, okay.
one section at a time. Yeah. Yeah. I
And
don't
they
think
try to
there's-
fill the section
Yeah,
and staff
and
that
that's how it's
section.
funded. They just get a block of money.
So right now, there's not any New York City.
There are, but there are more kids, and I want them to actually, I want some department, it's not gonna be the DOE to tell me, how many people are having kids here and then eventually just deciding that when their kid turns 2 or 3, like we can't do it here because of a lack of seats. We won't learn that unless we already invested all this money in this. Just try it, right?
Yeah, no.
But also the straightforward, how many kids are on the wait list? Like literally someone has that on their computer screen
Yes.
right now.
Yep.
Like that's there, right there.
Close enough to the school to, something in there.
I think so. Yeah.
Hang on, I already Egor's.
No, just so to make sure I understand correctly, so they being, I get mixed up which agency was responsible for that space. But, so they wanna just close it because
That's
on
been proposed to us.
machine says not enough demand.
Yeah,
essentially.
and then this smells to me like justifying what they want to do anyway, right? So they do this all. Every administration that comes in has mayoral control, and they have priorities, and they choose the answer that they work backwards to tell
The
you
answer.
why this answer is the most perfect answer that makes sense. And that's a problem, honestly.
I guess because I'm not really privy to these sorts of politics, like what is the answer? Why would you wanna essentially
Not open it? It's really, it wasn't a priority for the Adams administration, partially because they wouldn't get credit for making it successful because it was the last administration that started it. I don't know what the other part is, honestly. It seemed to be very petty politics.
Yeah. Yeah, but anecdotally, it was
Yeah.
like de Blasio's like
That's-
premier
that was
program,
his thing,
right?
and so,
So
like,
the new administration was
can't be
like,
seen doing that?
Yeah. Which is crazy.
Well, there's also a different issue, which is which borough is something going to be in.
Yeah.
Because at the moment,
Yeah.
who elects a mayor?
Yeah.
Brooklyn and Queens.
Yeah.
Not Manhattan, we're irrelevant.
Yeah.
So
That's separate.
if this were located in Brooklyn or Queens, they would get
Maybe.
perhaps more.
We had just like 9
Priority.
months ago, Brooklyn operators getting told that we're shutting you down. A CBO site that was 90% enrolled was told they're too low enrollment, which we have public
Right.
schools that are 30% enrolled. They're still open.
even
so-
less, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is from a sidebar conversation with a council member after one of the board meetings. There's no savings to the Department of Education by shutting this down and giving it back to the owner.
I mean, well, first of all, some costs, right?
What?
Yeah, and then yeah.
Yeah.
Will they save? I mean, they will.
No, they have it sounds like they have a very, we don't know, this is anecdotal. It sounds like they have a very tight contract with that landlord.
Oh, okay.
So to break the contract, they will not really be saving
It's not
money.
unsophisticated.
Yeah.
They're still,
So
they're
that's,
saving the
yeah,
operating.
so in that case.
They would
we
be
should
saving
not be-
operating costs,
Yeah.
you're right.
But
Mm.
they haven't even invested any of those yet. Plus, that $173 million came after a lot of this discussion.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we
We
should,
have 15 classes with 30 teachers, and, that's
Sorry?
a lot of money.
yeah, 30
Yeah.
adults at least, and.
I'm just saying, keep turning the facility back. It's not gonna save.
It's not gonna save the city,
That's still not
on.
as we're
We're gonna
discovering,
figure
like
out
at a federal
a
level too.
viable use for it.
So what can we do? Any-
One thing I would like, we are continuing, Superintendent Samuel said he'll come to our May meeting. I would like to figure out what data requests we can put in.
Yeah.
So that we're being very specific, so they know that like, we want to craft a story and craft an argument to see.
Yeah.
We're speculating that there's demand. I'm really quite confident we'll find that there is, but I would like to have the evidence to show that. So maybe if we could all kind of think about what specific data we want to ask DOE for.
Right.
To look at this space.
I have, I guess, a recommendation based on experience starting DOE programming and how hard it becomes. If you can get parents of 2-year-olds to sign on to a Bank Street operated early childhood
Right.
center and get like 1,000 of them, they won't be able to say no, right?
Right.
It literally will be, you can just say like, look, we have people agreeing to attend, just open the damn building.
Right.
So that is the one.
You mean like an old fashioned?
Petition, yeah, saying like, here's my child's name and year of birth, and I want to go here, why aren't you opening? Yeah,
It's hard to identify.
we didn't.
No, but it's,
You walk through Central Park, you see.
Yeah.
Playground, so go to the playground,
Yeah.
talk to the
Yeah.
moms, and be like, hey, how old is your
Is,
kid?
is that something that like someone they were, is that things that we do? Do we?
I don't know if we've ever done like a petition. One thing we definitely have done are like community meetings, and if you can get
Yeah.
a lot of people out Just community meetings are harder, especially for parents of young children. That's particularly difficult group to get out in the evening, right? But they can come, but if they're like, oh, there's the potential for free preschool, I feel like they might be motivated to come and speak up.
We did petitioning for Wes.
There was petitioning, yeah. Wes was a long process. That's interesting.
We did it in a number of schools.
Mhm.
So it's usually younger siblings of those kids that are already in schools, but I hope you'll find parents that are not considering public schools to consider this. And to see that the early childhood is a gem in the DOE, right? They work with them. It's one of the best operated ones because it's the newest. It had the benefit of learning from all the other things that they may have messed up in kindergarten. It's very progressive, play-based, and child-oriented. The small classes are baked into the funding. It's maximum 15 for 3K, maximum 18 for pre-K. So the new law had nothing to do there. It was only for upper grades, and had a great experience. And they have multilingual programming too. So if you need that, like if there is a demand for like a non-English pre-K.
Yeah, I think if we did want to do something like that, we have to do it before school dismisses in the end of June. So I'm literally just thinking on the fly.
I'm happy to help.
To hear anybody else's ideas.
Oh, I love the idea of petitioning in playgrounds.
Yeah, and get actual names, addresses of these people, and the year of birth of their child. So
Right,
we can build the data
Right,
ourselves.
just like politicians do when they're trying to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
Just a variation of that.
Do you think it's possible to get access to data that talks about, you know, the number of people that had kids in the neighborhood who have left? Or
It exists and we have had it in the past for other district planning things, but there is a lot of heel dragging. So if somebody wants to like slow walk it, they can. And like, they could be like, we're working on getting you that data. And they could be like, we'll have it for you in October.
Yeah.
You know, so.
You need this before July, right? You need
Right.
this, yeah.
I'm wondering whether we could interest any of our elected representatives in holding a kind of a town hall.
That's what I was, yeah.
Great idea,
particularly if it's-
great idea.
Because, you know, unless all of us are gonna be out in the playground,
Right.
which, you know.
I pretty much live in the playground after school,
Yeah.
so I'm happy to help in the upper part of
You know,
the district.
what we would have to do is get people to come to this meeting, and of those people who come, identify 4 or 5 workers who are willing to go out with petitions.
Yeah.
But you have to get them to a meeting first.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure CB7 has the cachet to attract that many people, but certainly our electeds do, and they also have
A mailing list, yeah. They have a mailing list and a name.
is it something that we could, or is there any interest in like writing to or crafting something to send to folks who are running for mayor, folks who are running for different
That's
offices?
what I was thinking. They're dying to speak in public to like young families. They're like, yes, come and talk to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's
No.
like, if it's too specific of an issue or if it's.
I think that based on Eric Adams' about face on this in the last 3 weeks, it's become significantly important.
I just, like, my perspective on it, when it was first brought to my attention through this group, was that like, here was this resource in an area as someone who was like considering these things, like, how can we not just open this door?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And it feels like the epitome of like bureaucratic mess. that it's like,
Yeah.
Just open the door.
Exactly.
I hear your point, by the way, but like, there's the cost of like staffing. So like,
Yeah,
that's obvious.
but the money's there now.
But-
No, but it's not the money. It's, there's some kind of inertia that we can't understand.
Yeah, but it's like to me, it's like, this feels like a very like, someone come here and promise me that you're gonna open this damn door.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like, it's a very easy win for any politician. Just like, okay, open the door. Like,
Yeah.
and everyone wins. Like,
Exactly. And we could do a coordinated like press hit, like that could definitely
Yeah, work
help.
with Jill and.
It would be nice to, if we wanted to do a press hit, it's always nice to give people something to do. So if we like set up some sort of meeting and we could say, listen to this outrageous thing.
Yeah.
Do you want to come to this meeting
Yeah.
so you can speak up about it? Right.
Are there any publicly available photos of the space? I mean,
I mean, I took photos on my phone.
Photos
Gail
are
took some.
publicly
I don't know if they're, are they
Walk through.
quarantined in any particular way? I think I can just
I mean,
share
the-
them.
I hate to say this, but a lot of our schools,
Yeah.
even where they have very solidly.
Yeah.
Solid educational programs.
Yeah.
Are dives. I just went through the high
Yes,
school
And
process.
this is why I'm so pissed about this, is because it's a beautiful facility.
It's a crazily
Floor to
beautiful
ceiling
space. It
glass.
really is.
I
It's
took one
like,
high school
Well, you don't want to spoil those kids.
for my.
I know, that sent them to the 100-year-old school.
and it does really
I've
suit.
seen gas stations with better bathrooms.
Yes,
We
I
were
agree.
talking about like other potential uses for it, but it does really, it is built for early childhood, and the biggest factor in that being there is no outdoor space, no dedicated outdoor space. So for the younger children who have shorter days, they don't need the outdoor
Yeah,
space.
yeah.
But, you know, in my neighborhood where I live, there are several pre-K school, private schools around walking. You see them walking the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's adorable.
Chain.
The rope.
Yeah.
On the
Or
rope.
walk from the park.
Yeah.
Riverside Park, not Central Park.
Exactly.
No, I love it.
Yeah, this is walking to Central Park, right?
Oh, it's a block.
Yeah, it's
So close to Central,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would be like a
best
less
playground.
trafficked kind of route, yeah. But I am open to ideas of how to do this. I don't want to take it all on myself. I am away a lot for the next 2 months.
So what is it about in terms of like engaging with electeds, right? Like, is this, like, if I send elected officials emails all the time, I get your back half the time. but
Right.
from-
No, they often want to hear it's like from someone they care to answer, which is terrible, but true. But I do think like I would start with coordinating with Gail's office because she has been working so productively on this. Max gets answers because he does represent Community Board 7, so people tend to answer. There's also the Borough Board. Is that correct, Max?
There's Borough Board and there's Borough Service Cabinet. One of those is the one I go to with the other district managers. Incidentally, it's tomorrow, and one is the one that Beverly goes to with new chairs.
Okay.
Max, is there a way that we can
But this is a local, this is
lean on you and
really.
something? I feel like what are the ways that we can like get something to you to them? Like, is there a route?
Probably. I'm not sure a bigger formal meeting like Borough Service Cabinet or Beverly's Borough Board would be it.
But are you speaking, when you go to like those 2 meetings, are there 8 representatives of the agencies there? Is that
Oh,
what
yeah,
it
there's
is?
that, yeah, so like for instance, at
Yeah.
mine, it's me and the 11 other district managers, the borough president, and then there's representatives from all the city's agencies, or
Yeah.
at least most of them there each day. And then there's usually a structured agenda, but then there's new business also at the end that you could raise.
Like, I'm just thinking, like, is there like an email that we could say, like, the Youth Education Levers Committee for Manhattan Community Board 7 is requesting that the elected officials of this
Yeah.
community speak to the ongoing
need
issue
to,
of the inability to open the early childhood facility.
Yeah.
Facility at 1972 or whatever it is, it was 92.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Uh,
you're
I think
making
very
a-
simple, like
You're
it's just a,
making a good point because the people who will be going to, the children who will be going to that school are beyond the district. In other words, technically it's Gale's district.
Yep.
But it could be, all kinds of
Oh, no,
places
and
within Manhattan, and
District
even
3
in
goes
other
well
boroughs.
above, yeah, like goes north of Gale.
Yeah.
The school district goes north of there, right, in Shakhnovskiy. It also overlaps with the borough president and with our state assembly members and
Gail
senators.
would be the place to
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
But she's definitely the one to start because she's been working on it, but
Would
we
be
can build it out.
More
for her.
immediately, maybe send an R email, like start sending out a form for people to sign.
Yeah,
I was thinking, yeah, actually, maybe starting with Gail would be good.
that's what I think. I understand like
Yeah.
stuff, yeah.
And if she could get a 1-pager offering from what Bank Street wants to do there, to present to the parents, to saying, look, we're trying to get this to you, but.
Yeah,
I got
exactly.
it.
That's why I
I
wanted
got
to
it.
hear
It's
from
not-
Bank Street today, because I
Yes.
want to hear what the offering
What is the
potentially
offer?
is, because that's.
I don't
what
see
we
how it doesn't fill up immediately.
can-
You get a
Yeah,
Free seat at Bank Street.
yeah,
Ooh, I might move downtown.
right. How much is it to go to Bank Street Elementary School a year, right? Like, I'm sure it's quite a lot, yeah.
So for early childhood, I think it's
Yeah.
around 55.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
it's expensive.
maybe six weeks, it's
Yeah.
40,000, 45,000, $50,000.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
the younger, the more expensive it is. Yeah, so the little ones.
That's what it runs.
not the only reason, it's damn expensive.
Yeah,
Right,
well,
but that's a pretty huge savings, right?
Yeah,
That's a really big
Yeah,
It's funny
expense.
because people are
Three
living
kids.
at the lower end
Yeah.
of the income spectrum as well. Lot of
East
hotels
vacation.
that thing, I've heard of them.
Um. Okay.
And the
I
worst
know.
thing that happens is we learn that there's not, like, we will, through this process, we might learn that there's not enough demand.
Right, if they
Because I
like,
don't trust that.
if they can really evidence that,
Yeah, we need to prove it,
okay,
yeah.
then that means
Yeah.
nobody's missing
I
out.
don't think that's gonna
But-
happen.
Yeah,
You're right. You're absolutely right. There will be demand. That beautiful building in that central
Some
location.
pictures, Bank Street's name, it's a little bit about the offering, that's enough.
yeah.
Right.
$0.
One thing I can commit to do is I'll try to drop the pictures into the drive tonight so that you all can look.
Because a lot of parents, I think they have already put down the deposit for next year.
Yes, we had that problem. We opened 3 sections in July and parents were like, we already paid like $1,000. So we'll see you next year.
Yeah, and they all get there.
But it's next year now, they're, but even if it opens, we have compassion.
The following year would definitely fill.
Yeah.
And early childhood has a little more flexibility.
Yeah.
Like, people do start mid-year, they do, it's not as like,
Yeah.
socially for children, it's not as locked in, like, you don't wanna switch in the middle of second grade, but in the middle of 3K, it's not
Yeah.
as like traumatic, yeah.
But one thing, like what Ira said, this is a beautiful facility. We have Bank Street's name.
Yeah.
And it's people will give up their $5,000 deposit possibly for this, right?
Yeah.
Because it's still. That's been actually one of my biggest frustrations with the deal. It's so backward looking, regressive, just like do something for God's sake.
Yeah, so I'm recruiting Navi to help me with this, but do I have another committee member that I can help, that I can suck into?
I'm happy to help but I just directed, I just don't know what that direction is, like,
Right,
if it's.
all right, good, I'll just keep everyone like, I'm gonna start by pushing Gail's office before we push out to other people. I just wanna speak to her
Yeah.
and then be like, we're ready to go and we're gonna.
And do you have a
bring
feeling
everyone
that she
in.
still wants to do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Very much,
Let's do it.
so. Yeah, because, I mean, she's a responsible
Yeah.
council member, but also like what elected official doesn't want like something lovely in their district for their constituents. Yeah.
So she gets finally do.
Yeah. Just
I
keep
told
going.
the director for mayor, she said I hate the other boroughs, so.
That's not a great soundbite. Citywide office.
I know she's joking, but she says that all the time, like, yo, what's
But, well, she might not play that well in the other.
All right, does anyone have anything else to add to the agenda of this meeting, or should we adjourn? I see
I was
one
hoping
member-
to,
To hear from. Hi.
hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Just want to do a sound check. Sweet.
We got
Yeah, I wanted to take maybe 5 minutes of your time to introduce or raise an issue. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. So good afternoon or good evening. I think we started in the afternoon. It's nighttime now, but my name is Molinari Barbadillo. I'm obviously a resident on the Upper West Side. I live close to the Manhattan Day School, close to Fairway Market off 75th Street. And this is my first time attending CB7 meetings. So I really enjoyed the conversation y'all had. So thanks for having me. But I wanted to join today's committee meeting as a concerned parent of a 3-year-old toddler. I have another baby boy due this September. And I wanted to introduce or raise a point in the record around a critical issue facing our youth and young people, and that's nutrition education in our public schools. I went to public schools my whole life, K through 12, college. I'm now in graduate school at the CUNY School of Public Health. And throughout my education, I never really received proper or adequate nutrition education as it relates to whether it's culturally appropriate, age appropriate, practical, what have you. And neither did my parents or their grandparents for that matter. And so by the time I entered my 30s, I was already diagnosed with pre-hypertension. And it took me a lot of work to reverse this condition. And so I wanted to raise this point because I'm currently working at the New York City Department of Health and Strategic Policy Initiatives. And for the record, this is not in my official capacity. These are all my own views. And, I'm really speaking from the heart here as a community member, as a parent, and somebody who's lived through chronic diseases personally in my family. And that's why I wanted to raise awareness around Gale's INT number 559. I'm not sure if folks are already aware of it, but it would require New York City Public Schools to report annually to the Board of Education the nutrition practices that are delivered in our classrooms. And as somebody who does currently work in city government, I know how nearly impossible it is to justify any type of administrative change unless we have the data to support it. I think some of the conversations we've been having today have really shed light on this issue. And that's ultimately what this bill does. It does ask that elementary, middle school, and high school students report on whether basic nutrition is taught at all to our students. And ultimately gain and garner a more granular picture to determine where support and resources are ultimately needed or and should be allocated. And so I'm not necessarily asking for the board to vote on a resolution of support or file a petition or anything to that effect today, but I wanted you all to just hear my thoughts on this bill, perhaps consider supporting its passage in the future. I'd certainly be happy to prepare a fuller presentation that would help you all determine whether this is something that CB7 would be open to supporting. But the bottom line is that nutrition is equally important to a long, healthy life, as it is to learning the alphabet or learning basic math skills. And these are life lessons that are often initiated at home, but studies do show that social reinforcement and education reinforcement in the classroom does help promote long-term behavior change. And so I'll just leave you all and end with some facts that I hope shed light to this important issue. Currently in New York City, over 1 million residents are currently diagnosed with diabetes. That's over 1 in 10 people who live here. Currently, 1 in 5 public school students is considered obese, and that number is even higher for Black and Brown children. And this growing pandemic of diet-related diseases results in extremely high costs, adding to the growing medical debt problem in this country and the state. And within New York State alone, diagnosed diabetes, and that's just diagnosed diabetes, not undetected or undiagnosed, costs an estimated of $21 billion to the state. And a big number of that, or proportion of that, certainly comes from New York City. And so in closing, I just wanted to reiterate that preventive health is our friend. I was fortunate enough to try to reverse this condition early on, but my parents didn't have that luxury, neither did my grandparents. And so wanted to share that if we educate our students now to have better nutrition, we're setting them up for success in the long term. So thanks so much for having me and given me the opportunity to speak with you all today. I really appreciate the work that this community board does to protect our community, support our community and our kids. So if you have any questions, thoughts, happy to connect or prepare a presentation at a future date to dive deeper into some of the data.
Go ahead, Richard has a question.
Can you provide us with a copy of the bill?
Yeah, I'm happy to provide a copy of the bill. The New York City Department of Health also recently published a state of the state on chronic conditions in New York City specifically that I'd be happy to circulate or walk this community board through, but whatever's helpful for you all to evaluate this issue.
That would be great. If you could share, I don't know if you've been in touch with our community board office with Max.
Is that Alex and Max,
Yes,
excuse me?
Yeah. So you can send the information through to Alex or Max, either one, and they will, share it with us. But yeah, it would be great if you want to come and speak to us and we can think about supporting a resolution around the bill. We can learn a little bit more about it. That would be really terrific.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, I didn't know exactly how some of these local government forums work. I haven't been before.
What's the sort of
Yeah,
time
go ahead.
frame around the bill? Like, when are they thinking
So
about?
it was introduced it was introduced in the last, or a version of this was introduced in the last legislative session, and it was reintroduced by Gale in this current legislative session. It has over 10 sponsors. I would assume this would be hopefully a favorable issue for the city council to take up, but in any case, I'd be more than happy to circulate some additional information, some data, and as well as that New York City Department of Health report that may offer some good insight into whether or not this is an endeavor that you all would be open to supporting.
Yeah, I think that would be terrific. If you share the information, then we can figure out when we can invite you to come and speak to us to see if we can do something. A resolution,
yeah.
letter, take some action around it.
I love it.
All right,
Sweet. Well,
you.
that's That's all I had for y'all today. So thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did you have
That
another
was my
question?
question.
That was it. Okay. Are we ready to adjourn or do we have any more action?
Move to